Thanks, Greg, and thanks. Great to be here. This is new for me because, as Greg mentioned, I always talk about international health issues or kind of big problems in global health or whatever, and I've never really talked much about this. And so when I thought of, the difference between the type of work that I usually do in the humanitarian front and the type of work I do in the entrepreneurial front, I realized that maybe staying at the win is the difference, and maybe I'm going to lean more towards the entrepreneurial front. Instead of staying in some cheap hotel in Rwanda, this is much nicer. So I want to talk a little bit today about, I won't get into numbers. I think the notion of starting up a company, well, first of all, how many people have started an LLC here before? Okay, so lots of people. And so the notion of starting up a company really comes, or a new venture or something of interest, really comes out of curiosity and sometimes frustration, and sometimes looking at an opportunity that just kind of lands in your lap. Of course, opportunity favors the prepared mind, so it's kind of a combination of knowing issues in your industry and then being open and interested in things that could affect that or change it. And that's kind of what brought me into almost every venture that I've been involved in. Certainly healthcare is changing, and maybe that's one of the reasons why there's a lot of people in the room anyway, to look at diversifying your own interests. And there's a lot of changes in the way that healthcare is moving. We'll talk a little bit about that because it provides opportunity and some risk in our current fields maybe. And then major movement towards health information technology and emphasis on quality and standards, and further opportunity to look at ways that we can affect that climate and maybe start businesses as well. Whether it's in medical devices or alternative manpower task shifting, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. So today I want to talk briefly about kind of a few macro trends in the field, discuss opportunities as I've felt it for medical entrepreneurs, and really pepper it mostly with some anecdotal experiences, however valid or not, that come from me, and some lessons learned, pitfalls, perils, and a few examples. My personal background is that my main interest is actually in humanitarian response, but it has actually, out of all the, startups or entrepreneurial ventures that I've done, this is the most challenging, difficult, complicated one, because this work is really in war and conflict. So I work with humanitarian organizations to help build their capacity to work in war and conflict, which is kind of a funky field, and it's a little bit of a difficult field to get into. And but there is tremendous opportunity. And I kind of treat this, my staff always thinks that I talk like a business person, I think too. I treat it as a business, and I talk about service lines, and I talk about clients, and I especially talk about venture capital, so that when we want to look at, how are we going to define the service needs of children born of rape in the Congo, some really crazy, difficult topic that we want to get to, and we want to define that need. That one of the things we have to do is research our market, find out who's out there, find out the needs, and then find out solutions. And the way to do that is I have to raise essentially venture capital to do it. And of course, I don't actually pay people back in money. I pay them back in good things we do, I hope. So anyway, but it has been a very aggressive, interesting, highly mobile pursuit. And then as a result of that, it just spawns issues of curiosity. And when I first started creating little companies, some stick to the refrigerator and some slide down and fall on the kitchen floor. I mean, some work and some don't work. And one of the first ones was IBEX, which is the little Apple thing, you can't read it well. But and that really came out of for two reasons. One is that the Joint Commission and CMS were making major recommendations about medical documentation 10 years ago. It was really stressing physicians, especially emergency medicine, that we weren't going to be able to document all this crap and get paid for it. And so Mark Crockett, who was a resident at the time at University of Illinois in Chicago, where I was a faculty member, were sitting in the back of the room and basically being bad participants in this sort of conference that they were putting on, saying that this is crap, we can't do this, this is ridiculous, we can do this better. And so really passing each other back and forth, we're writing furiously about what an electronic medical record system would look like. And by the end of not paying attention for an hour and a half at a Joint Commission conference, we thought of a company. And then we got on the phone, called some people, put it together, and started this company. And the genius behind that company is really Mark. And my only genius behind it is actually connecting people who really knew way more than I did, and so which was kind of my role in that. And Mark Crockett really was masterful in it and started the company. And as that started, then it really brought us into this new world where we're really uncomfortable and had no idea what we're doing. And so, you're literally selling this product out of the back of the trunk of your car and bringing it to emergency physicians in private hospitals who look at you like you're an idiot. And at ASAP, the American College of Emergency Physicians, you get a booth, except not the kind of glitzy, huge booths with all kinds of stuff. You get a little booth that's about 4 by 4 with a laptop and a PowerPoint presentation, and you're trying to sell people on a thing that you haven't actually even built yet. So there's a fair bit of making a fool of yourself as well. And but through that, then you get to know the business, and you get to know the business a little bit of IT and the business of health technology, which was really a huge new thing for me. And then as IBEX matured, at one point we sold our interest in IBEX, but I noticed there was a piece of there were further opportunities within medical informatics, especially the way emergency physicians think. So I got to be interested in the way that we use medical information real time to chart. So I was interested in integrated clinical decision support and started this other small company, the Risk Management Consortium, which is now a pretty small company still. And I partnered with another software company, and we're kind of pushing it forward, it's been very interesting, occasionally profitable. But also, and it takes a lot of work. And so a lot of the lessons that I draw from come from the experience of those two companies. Then I have another couple other ventures that we'll talk about as they come up later. But there are, in much of what we do, there are significant opportunities for innovation, looking at things differently, looking at the way common things that we see every day a little bit differently, and trying to come up with alternative solutions for them, and then having the guts, or not even just the gut, the energy, or the lack of constraints on yourself, whatever, to launch forward and to try something, and not being afraid to fail, because I've failed a bunch too. And I love this quote by Ray Bradbury. I've used it on my other international health ventures, that the notion of starting a business, or many of the ventures that you take in life, are like jumping off a cliff and building your wings on the way down. You just do it and figure it out as you go. And this has been kind of a life mantra here. So when you think about starting a company, and I looked online a little bit, because I think that every entrepreneur, everybody that starts a company, has a top 10 list of things of advice that they give. It also seems the more you see them, it's almost inversely proportional to their success. So that if they've flopped at about 9 businesses, they write a lot of top 10 lists. Bill Gates, I don't think, has one. I don't know if he probably doesn't bother with those. So anyway, but therefore, I'm going to give you my top 10. So the first, what I've learned from all of this stuff is that, is everybody a healthcare provider here? Is everybody a physician or nurse or a PA or somebody? I assumed. So nobody has a better idea of what an innovation is in healthcare, particularly in your field, than you do, because you live it every day. So if you get frustrated with things that don't work in your clinical setting, and you're there all the time, and you realize that, there's patients in the hallway like freaking all the time. I don't know what this is. I don't know why it is. Does it really have to be that way? Well, does it really have to be that way? And are there solutions for it? Now, maybe there are system solutions. Maybe you have to work within the hospital. But maybe there's either technology solutions or other things that can help affect the problems you see. So part of it is actually knowing a little bit about the field itself, the macro part of the field, like the trends of the field. And part of it is being opportunistic and looking for opportunities while you're sitting there at a shift, or charting, or seeing a patient. And so, to be aware of macro trends, and this is not deep analysis here, this is stuff that you already know, but to be aware of the way macro trends are going to happen and affect your practice, or affect the kind of people you'll see, and affect some of the problems that you'll face, is actually kind of worth thinking about. And I'll show you what I mean. So the boom generation is well known. You all know it. Some of you are. So the baby boomers just represent this kind of bulge in the population curve that kind of moves along. And so, as we know, the boomers starting in 1946 and then continuing on for several years created this big bulge of a population that moved along. And we're riding that, we're surfing the wave of the boomers, and we're going to continue to do so, whether we like it or not. This demographic profile of our population is getting older now. And as the boomers get older, healthcare services are going to become more important, and changes in healthcare services are going to happen. And those changes we'll see in our clinics, we'll see in our operating rooms, and we'll certainly see in our emergency departments. So, and don't worry about all the numbers, but this is borne out by the data, so that ambulatory medical surveys of the CDC shows that that a larger percentage of people who are seeing the doctor are older. Gee, go figure. But not only that, the number of people who are older, above 45, that are seeing the doc are greater as well. In other words, more people are older, and more of those people are visiting the physician more times. So they're doing so to manage their chronic medical problems, to manage their drugs, to get access to drug therapy, and to seek preventative care and in-home services, all of it. So the demographic bulge of the boomers is going to drive medical care and is going to continue to drive it. We just have to know what it's going to do to us and what's going to do to our practices. So the boomers are going to need things that are different. And one of the ways to characterize is actually this bottom point, and that is that in many of the boomer generations, as they get older in the next 10 years, they're going to transition from consuming goods, like cars and homes and material wealth, to consuming services like in-home care and a variety of services that will help them age gracefully, as it were. So, and this means that you're going to have more nursing home, retirement centers, and you're going to have the infrastructure demands for all of those things. So not just nursing home, retirement centers, Meals on Wheels, all of that stuff, but you're going to have the services that go with that, the people that go with that, the software that manages that, the drugs that get applied in that setting. So all of those things are going to move that way, and your emergency departments, many of your emergency physicians, will change as well. So, which leads me to my next point, and that is figuring out and defining your niche and what your thing is going to be, because this is obviously a huge movement that you can see, whether you're tailoring your care to the baby boomer generation or you're looking after the stimulus package and the degree to which IT is going to be a bigger thing in every hospital. How do you choose your market niche, and how do you understand your market niche and focus on it so that you can decide on something that's going to be important to go after? And certainly anything in health and information technology, which is dicey. Sometimes, I mean, it's a pretty saturated field in many ways, but there's always room for innovation. Pharmaceuticals, a little bit difficult. So unless you're in pharmaceuticals, the development, and Josh is going to talk about this, I'm sure, the development costs are pretty massive. Biomedical devices and various products for consumers that they may need. Now that can be very simple, or it can be complex. And so, for example, the urinal, right? We've seen the urinal, the famous urinal. I think this is dumb. It spills all the time, doesn't work very well. Every time I see that thing, I think somebody's got to design a different urinal, man. This is a dumb thing. Every time it opens out and it doesn't work very well, and it's all a mess, and patients hanging off the side of their bed with, it's nasty. So somebody ought to invent another urinal. I think there's some cash out there for this. So if you got a startup going with that, I'll invest in that, I think. So anyway, know what problem you're solving. If you're looking at a specific problem, whether this specific or not, look at a problem you're solving. Think of the solution that you're proposing. Is it better than what's out there already? Invariably, with the urinal, it'll probably be better. Is it profitable? In other words, would you buy it, or would somebody buy it? It doesn't really have value inherent to the product that you would say, oh, definitely, I would, for 30% more, I would buy a urinal that has an ingoing valve and doesn't spill all the time and is more ergonomically correct or whatever. And I guess. And then who are your clients? Understand who your clients are and your competitors. Many of the new businesses nowadays are not coming up with a brand new thing. They're coming up with something they're competing against an existing competitor, right? So the urinal, you'd be competing with the curved urinal company, so you need to know your competition because you can learn from your competition. And I also think that, I have some thoughts about the competition because as you start up any venture, you're going to run into somebody who's doing the same thing or a variation of the same thing, and maybe can infuriate you because either they're obnoxious, better, or faster than you are. So the first step in all this then is create a realistic business plan, a blueprint. This isn't actually really a picture of a blueprint. It was just something blue, so I just put it on the slide. Because all the blueprints look boring on the internet side. And part of it is actually then getting a realistic opinion of or assessment of what it is you plan to do. So if you're going to make the Acme Urinal Company, for example, write out what it is. What's the market? What's the volume? What's the pricing? What's manufacturing? And this is stuff that you know, if you went to business school, maybe you'd learn, I never went to business school, so you just make it up. And you can find anything on the internet. You can find out copies of business plans. You can get a business